Hi, Lisa. Thank
Hi.
you for joining me for this conversation.
Sure. Happy to be here.
So I'm Carolina with After Third, and this is Lisa. And Lisa, could you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, absolutely. I am a social worker and art therapist. I work as a psychotherapist and coach. Have a private practice in New York, specialize in working with the perinatal population in, everything to do with parenting, children, anxiety disorders, and, happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you chatting with me today because we're going to talk about something really important. And
Yes.
this is our third time talking about it because
Yes, that's how
we
important it
tried.
is.
Yeah. Um, so we're going to talk about how parents can cope right now and how in taking care of themselves, they're actually taking care of their children.
Yes, absolutely. Especially right now with the pandemic, parents and families seem to have been gotten hit sort of the most, and it's a tough time right now for families.
So tell me, what kind of things have you been hearing from families?
Sure. Well, one of the things that I've said, and I know I've said this to you several times, is that people keep, reiterating that this is such a crisis for their kids. And I can entirely validate where those feelings come from, because, I mean, it is a tough time. Schools are limited or, not available at all and stuff. Your, ability to be able to go out, be with friends, things like that, and everything's limited. But really, this is a crisis for families. It's not just specifically a crisis for kids. So, one of the things I've been hearing is really parents struggling with being able to regulate themselves, cope with like the day to day stressors of juggling, online school, juggling their jobs, juggling like, taking care of household and everything else that has to do with that, not having any help. That's been a really big one. Not being able to sort of depends on schools as much for childcare or not at all, right? Um, and because it takes a village to raise our kids, it's kind of like there is no village. It's on parents' shoulders to do everything. And it's overwhelming. Plus, it's like the stressors of knowing how to respond to your kids when they ask questions that are triggering for parents, meaning like, why can't I see so and go over so and so's house? Right. And parents are triggered by these things because this is a sore subject and a source of anxiety for families, i.e., the pandemic and the limitations. So that's a lot of what I've been hearing, a lot of increased anxiety, a lot of feelings of isolation where Zoom just is not enough anymore, right? They need community care, they need face to face care. And, just overall sadness that's caused by, the things that I just mentioned.
And so I think there's two really important pieces that I'd love to delve into a little more. The first is around sort of the impact to children and how the parents
Yeah.
impact their children. And the second piece is how what parents can actually do to take care of themselves. So tell me which
Yep.
one you want to talk about first, but you've mentioned both of them and they're both really important.
Yes, I mean they're both equally important, but let's start with parents really because I say this all the time. I said this even prior to the pandemic that the best that you can do, both for your relationship with your kids, and for yourself is really to care for yourself. It's kind of like that whole, putting your own oxygen mask on first before you can kind of assist other people. And I mean, parents know this very well that when they're, well rested, when they've taken care of themselves, when they've recharged, just how much it's easier to be around and be available and hold space for our kids. um, so when all of these things are taken away from parents, right, then it just becomes that much harder for parents, to be able to be available, hold space, for kids. So, taking care of self is not a luxury, it's a necessity. It's just as much of a necessity as, everything else that we sort of do for ourselves, like say brush your teeth. Self-care and wellness is just as important. Um, so yeah,
So,
definitely important.
so in this environment that we're in, what are the basic components of self-care that you would
Right.
tell all parents that they should absolutely commit to, non-negotiable? What are they?
Yeah, I mean, one is, I'm a big advocate for therapy, and not just for, when you're in crisis mode, but just sort of as preventative care. So the other piece is seeking support, even if, say you're not comfortable doing face to face. I mean, everyone has their own comfort level right now as to what they're doing or not doing in terms of like, face to face and things like that. But keep your support system close to you, touch base with them frequently. The other piece is check in with yourself. So, if you realize you're in a grouchy mood because of XYZ, say you haven't eaten anything all day, have a snack, eat. Um, take care of basic human needs. Like that's definitely really, really important. Prioritize sleep, get as much sleep as you can. Prioritize like eating balanced meals, like drinking water, taking showers, like, things like that. The other piece is it actually, you know, it the things that you enjoy doing, as parents that you enjoy doing, say you enjoy baking, right? Do those things with your kids. Because one, it fosters connection with your children. It's gonna create intimacy with your kids. The other piece, it'll make you feel better. So even if you're having like the really, really difficult day, do an activity with your children, even if you're not in the mood to do that. It's going to bring you closer and it's going to make you feel better. And that also includes like, turn on music and just be silly with your kids and dance around the room and things like that. Um, you know, it'll make you feel better to do these things. Um, the the other piece, I'm a very big advocate for practicing mindfulness, and I think that that's really, really important, especially now. And to do so, you can really just sort of check in with yourself. So what's coming up for you? What emotions are coming up for you? What thoughts are coming up for you? And the rest of it, it's really just what self-care looks like for one individual versus another individual. That's very unique. So those are my tips.
So those are really good. I will say that for me personally, and I know you and I both are working from home with children, I've
Yes.
found that the schedule around eating and sleeping is really important for the whole family.
Yeah.
So being consistent about making sure we always eat at the same time and making sure that we're eating nutritious
Right.
food.
Right.
It's
Right.
so easy when you're stressed to go to the quick and easy things, and they're fine once in
Yes.
a while. And
Yes.
they're fine if you're doing them more often than you did before, but I think
Right.
if you start relying on them for every meal, then it'll have an impact. Or if you start skipping meals, you might
Yeah.
let meal time slide for the kids. And yeah, so those routines have been helpful for us. It
Yeah.
doesn't
Yeah.
make it easy. I've still been eating more chocolate than I
No.
would like, but
And that's okay, right? Like there's nothing wrong with chocolate. I also forgot about a few other pointers. Is one, it's important to sort of simplify your life right now. I mean, you brought up nutrition meals, and that's so, so, so important. But, there are parents that after a very, very difficult work day where they're exhausted that just don't have the energy or capacity to do that. And, there's no shame in in giving your kids frozen pizza or getting takeout or something, if that's what it takes to kind of simplify your life for your own self care. The other tip which is, I know it's been helping me and it's been helping other families, like just because, people kind of live in their pajamas and yoga pants right now, it will make you feel better to get dressed in the morning. It really does. It's like there's it kind of creates this sort of separation from like, what you're doing all day long to, okay, it's time to go to work. It's time to do this. So that can be a helpful tip too.
that's a really good one. I have to say, I make my whole family, I make my kids change their clothes in the morning.
Yeah.
Even even when they weren't going to school, so we had some semblance of the routine. They got to pick what they wore,
Yes.
so it got very
That's
creative at
there
some
you
point.
go. There you go. And routine, routine is helpful for a lot of families too. And obviously just being kind and gentle with yourself. This is a really tough time. This is where to some degree just some acceptance needs to come in that it's okay to not feel okay. It's okay to sort of feel all the emotions.
So can you elaborate a little bit more on how someone can do that for themselves? Because I think if they didn't
Yeah.
practice it coming into the pandemic, it's even more crucial now, but
Yes.
it's something that takes practice.
It does take practice, and I mean, in my work with clients, there's a big, big, big part of learning to practice acceptance, because it's not always easy. And acceptance doesn't mean that you give up. It doesn't mean that you're in denial. It doesn't mean that you just accept this as being great, right? And that's what's really important to do. It's kind of like you stop fighting what is and you just accept that this is reality. It sucks. It's hard. It's going to be hard for a while. This too shall pass, but that you sort of face it for what it is. And I would add the other piece, figure out ways to make it a little more bearable for yourselves. So,
So one of the things I've read about is that one way you can start being kinder to yourself is by when you have a moment where you say, I messed up, or you're being
yep.
hard on yourself, notice that you're being hard on yourself, and then imagine a good friend. And if that good friend did the same thing and asked you about it, what would you say to them? Think about what you would say to them and then say that back to yourself. That's one of the things that someone taught me. And also, I've read about it.
Yeah, no, no, completely, because we're the hardest on ourselves. It's true that some of the things that we say to ourselves, like if other people said that to us, it would be abuse, right? So it's like, why are you doing that to yourself? And that's where it's like recognizing what are you saying to yourself that's leading to these kind of catastrophic feelings of doom and gloom, and that can be helpful too, because our thoughts and our feelings are very much interconnected.
And so, just to bring it back, we've talked about taking care of yourself as a parent, making space for yourself, simplifying things, and just forgiving yourself and speaking to yourself with compassion. So, just to take it back, how does that help our children?
So, how does it help your children is that you're modeling, how to respond to a crisis, essentially. Like your kids in times of distress, they're going to turn to their caregivers, to sort of observe how you're handling it. So it's like even if you feel that you're not actually speaking the words and saying that you're dealing with a tough time, they can see that with your behavior. All behavior is a form of communication. So really you're sort of showing them how to respond to crisis, to anxiety, to trauma, to like, to the isolation, to everything that's going on with you. So that's what's really important to be able to model that. Your kids ultimately don't become what you say, they become who you are and how you model behavior. So that's something that's really, really important. I mean, all of these emotions that are coming up, they're completely valid. Even the point of therapy, it's not to take away emotions and basically make you feel numb. You're a human being and you're going to feel them, right? But it's how we respond to our feelings. That's what's important. It's so you're also modeling to your kids that, it's okay to feel anxious, right? It's okay to kind of in times of uncertainty to sort of wonder what's going on and have some anticipation and worry. But it's how do you handle those feelings? That's what's important.
And so, I know we've talked a lot about things that parents can do, but if you wanted them to take away three things that they can take action on, what are the
Yeah.
three things you want them to take away?
I mean, seek out therapy if you're feeling like you're going through a tough time. And really, I do mean that because it can be truly, truly helpful. Simplify, prioritize your life and prioritize things. Like, honestly, it's if you've had such a tough morning, it's been such a tough time with your kids, don't turn on the Zoom class. It's okay to kind of say no to things, to set limits in your life, to sort of prioritize intimacy, relationships, things like that. Um, your own self-care, your own well-being, that's more priority. Your kids' well-being, right? That's more priority over the other stuff. So that's also really, really important. And like I had mentioned, also, self care. I should add that also our relationships are very significant too. So I am going to throw in a fourth point there, meaning like, prioritize relationships with your partner, prioritize relationships with your kids, with support system, etc.
That is wonderful. Thank you, Lisa, so much. This is really good advice, and I know that all parents need this right now.